Hello everyone, it's Jeff again, back with another Spin Zone video. I completed my listening project of XTC, and I had 4 more albums to go. Actually, it was 2 XTC albums plus a 12-inch single and a Dukes of Stratosphere album. So those are the 4. And alternating in between them were 4 other albums that you'll see. A few that I posted on Facebook. So before I get to that, just picking up from what I said in my last video, my VCLT video, I got this book the other day. It's called Elevation. It's by Stephen King. As you can tell, it's very thin, and I read it in a day, even though I tried to stretch it out for at least 2. But I read half of it actually yesterday morning, and then later in the afternoon I went back and finished it. So it's good. It's more like just a short story for Stephen King. This is not a novel. This is more like a short story or a novella. But it pays a little homage to Richard Matheson. That's what it says in the epigraph at the beginning of the book. Thinking of Richard Matheson, and the lead character, Scott Carey, I think is a homage to The Shrinking Man, which was a famous novel that Richard Matheson wrote. And if you haven't read it, by all means, pick it up. It's really good. Not to get too far off into books, but since I mentioned this, I at least wanted to tell a little bit what I thought about it. I'm not really going to spoil it for you because, like I said, it's such a short, quick read. But it was all right. You know, this guy is losing weight, but is not showing it physically. So when he steps on a scale, even if he's holding something or even if he weighs himself down, it doesn't register on a scale. So he loses mass, but it doesn't reflect it in his physical form. Why? He never explains it. If you're a longtime King reader, you'll know that the whys and the hows is not anything that he is remotely cares about. So if you're looking for reasons and answers as to why this guy has this affliction or even how he got it, none of that is explained. It's all just, everything is all about the characters and the story itself. So it was all right. Decent read, but it went by way too fast, and he easily could have fleshed it out a little bit more, but you know, for whatever reason, that's the length that he chose. So after that, not that I'm turning this into a book review column video, I picked up Dune, and I started reading that today. Yeah, I mean, I think almost everyone has heard of this, I think, at some point. I watched the David Lynch movie from the 80s, a long, long time ago. Couldn't really make sense of it. I think this was made into a miniseries a couple of years ago, too, or maybe longer than that. But I never watched it, so my interest was just piqued by seeing it on the shelf one day, so I bought it, and here it is. So started it today, but haven't really got very far into it. My tooth is still there. Went to the dentist today, which is why I couldn't really relax and get into a book, but basically my gums have healed, the swelling has gone down, and he was able to take the impression for the permanent one today. So he numbed me up, and he ended up drilling on me some more and picking at it and fussing over it and scraping at it. I don't know what he was doing, but he ended up working on me again, so my whole side of my face was numb for like the last couple hours. It's worn off by now. I'm not in any pain, thank God. But He took the impression, and then he cemented the temporary back. So I have to live with this fucking thing for another week, at least. Oh well. I'm too scared that it's going to pop out, so I do most of the chewing whenever I eat something on this side. It's probably like 80-20. You know, I know I can probably chew safely on it, but Anyway, let's get to the good stuff, which is the music. Left off with Mummer on my first video, and now we are moving on to the Big Express. Take it out of the sleeve, show you the back here, and the theme of the rotating record labels appears to have stopped. It's still on Geffen, and I think the other ones are still Geffen as well, or Geffen Virgin, I should say. But this album came out in 1984. It doesn't have any, I don't think it had any radio hits off of this one, but All You Pretty Girls is probably one of the most memorable tracks, and that's one of the songs that's on the 12-inch single that I'll be showing. It's almost like a sea shanty, but very XTC-ish, for lack of a better term. Like I said, this album was, it was very good. It probably wasn't as memorable because I didn't have a single to attach memories to. So, in that regard, I would probably need to live with this probably a little bit more. So, Big Express by XTC, very good. It fits right in with the rest of their music. But I probably would just need a little more experience with it. Then, I'm finishing up a long-time listening project by an album that I completely forgot about when I said I was going to listen to it before and didn't. But that was Harvest Moon by Neil Young. This was the last album that I had left of his to listen to. I remember buying this new. I still have this on CD. This was the tour. The gatefold. This album was the tour that I saw Neil on, where it was just him solo. Fantastic show. And then this is probably the last full-length album of his that I like beginning to end. I kind of parted ways with Neil after this one. This is basically a sequel to his 1972 album Harvest. He reunited with the Stray Gators to make this, and coming after his very loud album Ragged Glory, this was a total 180. This is a very quiet album, very calm, acoustic. You know, the title track is a very sweet song. You know, it's good to dance to with your loved one, whoever that may be. But yeah, I mean, War of Man was one of my favorite songs, and I hadn't played this album in probably 15 to 20 years, so War of Man was one of the great songs I liked. The title track, of course, Unknown Legend, From Hank to Hendrix, and this copy is only a 3-sided album. The 4th side is a, let's see if I can pull it out here and show you quick. Side 4 is a, you can see that, is of the cover. Just wrecked myself in the face. Ha. But yeah, after this, I tried following Neil a little bit longer. You know, I have the Sleeps with Angels album. I didn't really care for it. I tried him again with the Are You Passionate album. I had that on CD as well. That didn't click with me either. In the 2000s, I just kind of fell away from Neil. Not that that's a bad thing, but he puts out a lot of material, and as his career went on, it just didn't seem to mesh with my tastes at the time, whatever that may be. Even though I kind of see him outside any sort of fad or trend, but in terms of beginning to end albums, this is pretty much where I stop with Neil. So this is the last hurrah with me and Neil Young on vinyl. Of course, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop buying Neil Young albums as they come out, because as we've seen over the last few years, he's been finally issuing some older material like the Hitchhiker album, which was supposed to come out in '76. And there's another album that I already pre-ordered that's going to come out, I think, next month, or maybe later this month, called Songs for Judy, which is a live album from, I think, '76 also. So, yeah, Harvest Moon. It's good. It's where I kind of stop with Neil. So, back to XTC. This is the 7-inch, 12-inch single of All You Pretty Girls, which I mentioned. There's the back. And it just has that song, and on side 2 it has a song called Wash Away, and another song that I really enjoyed that wasn't on the Big Express album called Red Brick Dream. And it was a very, it was an acoustic guitar type of song, but it was just drenched in reverb. And the vocals were kind of blurry with reverb, and it was very almost kind of Beatlesque, kind of psych Beatlesque, I guess. Which would point the direction that they would end up going with the Dukes of Stratosphere. So I saw this at the record show. I think I only paid like $3 for it. So I grabbed it just because, you know, just to have it. All You Pretty Girls, like I said, it takes up the whole side of one of the singles, and it's really quite good. It's another earworm-worthy song, just like all the other XTC songs, apparently. Then you follow that up with a soundtrack to a movie called Mike's Murder, which I've never seen. But for all intents and purposes, it's a Joe Jackson album, because all of the music and all of the lyrics are by Joe Jackson. But it's really only half of a Joe Jackson album, because side 2 is all instrumental, what I call background music. So, which is nice. You know, it's pleasant, but side 1 is the side that has actual songs on it. And actually, Memphis was one that I'd heard many times before on the radio. So I think I found this at an estate sale and just picked it up because I like Joe Jackson. And this was the only one, I think, of his from the 80s, from like 79 to 86 that I was missing, because this came out in 1983. So this must have come out after the Night and Day album, I think. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Joe Jackson. Always loved his stuff, especially his early years. And when I saw this, just had to have it. So the soundtrack to Mike's Murder, good stuff. Then we go back to XTC. After they released the Big Express, they put out the Dukes of Stratosphere EP, which I have, and I've shown that in an earlier video. Then they did the Skylarking album, I believe, which I've already shown in an earlier video and talked about, and you can get people much more eloquent than I on the VC to talk about that album as well, that I've seen in other videos. Then, after that, in 1987, they went back to the Dukes of Stratosphere and released a full-length album called Psionic Sunspot. Here's the back. And we are still on Geffen. So that's cool. Like I said, like I may have said before when I showed the EP, this was XTC paying homage to the music of the mid to late 60s. Basically, I kind of call it nuggets as done by XTC because a lot of these songs are very radio-ready gems that could have fit in, 20 years earlier from when this was made, which was 1987. So I could just read the names of the songs off to you, but if you're not familiar with this album, that's not going to mean anything. I know I do that. I don't know why I do that sometimes. I think I should probably stop. Especially, it does nothing for people who's never heard of this album. But let me just say, I'm learning, guys. What can I say? There's another great one. And actually, this kind of revitalized their sound a little bit, because I think by the time they hit the Big Express, I think they were kind of hitting a wall, so to speak. And doing the whole retro thing, pretty much before anybody else was doing it, kind of revitalized their creativity and their sound a little bit. So this was one of the harder ones for me to get. I think this was the last album that I needed for me to have a complete run of what I could find from XTC. So very happy to have this in my collection. Psionic Sunspot by the Dukes of Stratosphere, aka XTC. Then from there we go to World Party. This was one I showed on Facebook recently. It is a very warped copy. This is probably the most warped record in my collection. But it still plays. It didn't skip, and it tracked okay, and it sounded good. Even though, I was just watching the arm on my turntable go up and down, and I'm watching the counterweight swinging back and forth, and it was kind of hypnotic, actually. But yeah, those first 2 or 3 tracks on the outer edge of the LP, it's really kind of nerve-wracking because I was waiting for it to just skip. I don't know if it's going to show. Yeah, you can kind of see. Yeah, it's... The good news is I got this for free because I bought this at a record show, and originally he only had a $2 price on it. And he told me it had a warp to it, but that it still played okay. And I said, that's fine. I don't care. I'll take a chance for $2, I used to have this album many moons ago. And when I saw it for so cheap in such good condition, I just wanted to reacquire it. So I bought in a small stack of records from the guy. And as I was paying, I think he just must have felt guilty or something. So he just said, just take it. Just take the record. It's okay. So I ended up getting this for free. I've always liked World Party. Ship of Fools is probably the big hit off of this album. But other songs in here like All Come True, I think that may have been another minor hit for him, was also very good. The title track, Private Revolution. These were all songs that made me want to search out more music by World Party. So the album after this one, called Goodbye Jumbo, is actually even better, and I have that one on CD. But for a first album, this was very, very nice. Private Revolution by World Party. The most warped but still playable album in my collection thus far. And finally, the last XTC album that I have on vinyl is Oranges and Lemons. This is a double album. This came out in 1989. This was also a difficult and expensive album to acquire. I really wish that Virgin or Geffen or whoever owns their albums now would reissue them and just do a comprehensive series and just reissue everything and just make it easier for people to get these albums, because a lot of these are very tough to get. It's a double album, no gatefold, and to say, just to reiterate everything that I said before, I mean, King for a Day is on this song, which is kind of a dreamy pop tune. Mayor is Simpleton is also probably another radio hit off of this album. But really, like I said, it's XTC. It's not as psychedelic as you might think, judging by the album cover. It doesn't really have that much of a psych sound to it. But it's, I think, like I said before with the Dukes of Stratosphere album, I think that project for them kind of revitalized their sound and pushed them in a slightly different direction, because it does sound, they sound a little more refreshed on this album than they did like on the Big Express. So this was easily, you know, it's right up there with Skylarking as far as I'm concerned, as a beginning to end a double album, which is even harder to achieve, to make good all the way through. So in that regard, this was a nice capper to my listening project. Although, like I said, I would really love to see a lot of these albums get reissued, because after this album, they put out another one called None Such, which came out, I think, in 1992. This one came out in 1989. And then they got into a big fight with their record company, and they didn't put out any music for like the rest of the 90s. I don't think until Apple Venus Volume 1, I think that came out, maybe that came out in 1999. And then Volume 2, which was called Wasp Star, which I have on CD, that came out in 2000. And that's thus far the last XTC album, which is a shame. But I know the two Apple Venus records have been reissued on vinyl. I'll probably get them someday, but I would love to have None Such on vinyl. I really wish that would get reissued, because you can't find that anywhere on vinyl. So I don't know whoever owns the rights to that album anymore, but they would make me very happy if they would just put the damn thing out on vinyl. But overall, this has been a very, very enjoyable few weeks going through all of these XTC albums. And they're going to be albums that I return to over time and absorb more fully than what I've done so far. And yeah. So concludes XTC. But that doesn't conclude the video, because I got one more to show you. Seconds Out by Genesis. I listened to the first disc, I think on Monday. And then yesterday, when I was passing out Halloween candy, I had the second side playing when my wife was here. We were sitting here in the front room. So I was able to listen to this one all the way through. I know Tim also was playing this album, DJ High Noon. I'll just show you the gatefold here. Really great stuff. And boy, does this really showcase how great of a drummer Phil Collins is. Or was. Just unbelievable. And especially on side 3, which Supper's Ready takes up the entire side 3. And man, besides being a great vocalist, you really forget sometimes, because of all of the poppy stuff that he did like in the 80s and 90s. But man, Phil Collins was a fantastic drummer, especially in this era. And he really shines on this album, his drumming. So this was very nice to listen to, very pleasant. And yeah, I'm still going to be continuing on with my Genesis listening too. So I'll be seeing more of their albums from me in the future. I'll be looking forward to see the Vinyl Versus ranking video of the Genesis albums. I'm waiting anxiously for that, and I can't wait to see how that pans out, and where this album will be in his rankings. So for a double live album, this one stands tall with a lot of the classics. Seconds Out by Genesis. It's really great stuff. Okay, that's it for me for now. thank you all for watching. I have a couple of other ideas for themes for future videos. In fact, I might start working on that even today as soon as I'm done. So hope to see you guys soon. Hope everyone had a happy Halloween. We're into November now, and the weather is slowly starting to turn. So this is my favorite time of year. I love the fall. And hopefully the next time I see you, I'll have my permanent tooth in, which would be nice. But you never know. So until then, take care. This is Jeff. Peace, and I'll see you soon.